Greetings. This is TK Trav, aka Travis Magus, here with LVX777. Today we're going to discuss the importance of sigil magic and how it can actually correct any deficiencies, disruptions, or maladjustments in your life. So the title of this video is "This Sigil Will Solve All Your Problems." And this is true. But to follow behind that statement, that grand title, is that there is no one specific symbol that's going to do this for you. However, it's up to you to find the particular symbol that you can connect with within your subconscious mind to allow this to happen. So this video is going to be about how to do that. It's going to be about that process. So as we begin, I'd like to introduce, or I should say, welcome you to this video. In case you don't know who I am, I'm Travis Magus. I am an occultist, a practicing occultist, initiated in the Kabbalah, Goetic magic, and all number sorts of things. You can check my YouTube channel for different topics on the things that I've covered. But like I said, today we'll be going over chaos magic, sigil magic, one and the same. Peace to 5,000 Nate, peace to the magical magician. TMTC 336, peace. Al Dickey, peace, good to see you, bro. Laura Cole Calbert, peace. And everyone, as you come into this live stream, if this is a topic that you're interested in, go ahead and hit the like button. I'm absolutely positive that the information that I will share will benefit you and you'll be able to put it to use. So about 2 weeks ago on a live stream, I talked about a certain type of framework, right? And there's so much information that we can cover. This doesn't get old and stale, wide range of topics. But previously, I shared my framework, my framework that I've condensed into 5 pieces. And I've been doing this long enough that I start to see patterns. If you do anything long enough, you start to see patterns, recurring patterns. And what separates a novice or a beginner from an expert or someone who's achieved mastery is that when you've had enough experience in a particular subject, you begin to notice these patterns and you begin to have a certain level of discernment where you can separate what is useful and what is appropriate from what is useless and what is inappropriate. So a beginner doesn't have that level of discernment. So that's why there's a lot of trial and error in the beginning. However, with a lot of experience comes that trial and error already having been achieved. And after that trial and error, you start to be able to separate the gems from the lumps of coal. And in my trial and error, I've come to find that there are certain gems that can allow a practicing occultist to achieve repeated success in any of his or her endeavors. So like I said, 2 weeks ago, I talked about this framework that I've broken down into 5 pieces. And this framework came from me asking myself, who do I have to be? What kind of person do I have to be? What do I have to know in order to have repeated success, specifically with goetic magic, with evoking goetic spirits? But this truly can be applied to any level of magic. Why? Because ultimately, when it comes to magic, what we're dealing with is learning how to influence the subconscious mind so that it can produce an effect in your life, right? Knowing how to do that on purpose. It's done to you every day. It's done to you by nature. It's done to you by culture. But once you learn how to do it to yourself, you start arranging the sails on your boat so that you can go in the direction that you'd like to go, as opposed to being pushed along. So I hope that's clear. Peace, Gerald Sombright, long time no see. Bella 85, peace. Jaren, peace, good to see you. Marcos Lucas, peace. More Soul Knowledge TV, peace, brother, peace. So to really get down to this framework of these 5 main categories of information that can help anyone achieve repeated success can be broken down like this. The first category starts with what I call ontology, and that's the lay of the land. This is the foundation of everything else. So specifically within the ontology, there has to be an understanding of the dual nature of this reality. And when I say the dual nature, what I mean is that there is what we can consider consciousness versus matter. These are the 2 different aspects of reality, and everything else is born out of the union of these 2 things. So we've got consciousness and we've got matter. And understanding the importance and the role that these 2 things play. There's a lot of implications behind consciousness over matter. But one of the main implications about consciousness over matter is that there has to be an understanding of what is consciousness and what is matter. That's why I say versus. Not that they're at war, but that the individual has to have a level of understanding between the difference, discernment. And this is crucial, because if that level of understanding is not had, you won't know how to do what you're doing. In other words, if you're trying to manifest a certain thing, not knowing the difference between what is material versus what is spiritual, you'll get mixed results every time. But really good evening. How are you, Lasange?
I'm well. How are you?
Doing good.
Nice.
So really, the big thing about consciousness over matter and understanding the difference is that this leads to a certain level of authority. One of the biggest reasons that people aren't able to successfully work with goetic spirits or any other spirits successfully is because there's a missing level of authority, right? So in an understanding truly of what consciousness is, it comes with this level of authority. It comes with that, so that you know that what you're working with, what you're commanding, what you're evoking are different levels of matter. So along with the ontology, you've got consciousness over matter, you've got the different planes of existence, the astral plane, the mental plane, the physical plane, and what those are comprised of. Today's discussion, we're going to talk a little bit about the etheric plane. Universe B, a lot like the video that I showed earlier with Bobby Hemmett, and also the different types of spirits, right? So knowing all this right there gives you a good lay of the land, so you know the field that you're stepping into. Once you have a firm understanding on those subjects, the next level is what I call the methodology, right? So we started with the ontology, which is consciousness versus matter. Next is the methodology. And what this consists of is what I've called the 7 pillars of the mages. And you've heard me talk about this before. But this is understanding the principle of correspondence, right? As above, so below, as within, so without. Understanding the concept of consistency. There has to be a level of repetition. The same way, because, again, with consciousness over matter, what moves matter is repetition. Just think to yourself, you've got this body. If you want your body to look a certain way, there's certain repetitive actions that you do, and those actions begin to mold matter, right? So if you go to the gym frequently and you do a specific exercise consistently, the matter of your body will begin to mold and shape in a different way, right? The same way that if you choose to, if there's a group of people who walk through the forest along the same path for years, decades, centuries, that will change the matter, the grass. A natural path will start to form. If you repeat certain types of thoughts, certain types of emotions and feelings, it builds connections and pathways in the mind, right? The matter is changed based on consistency. So correspondence, consistency, clarity of purpose, knowing what you're doing. Believe it or not, there's a lot of people who jump into this kind of thing and don't know why they're doing it. They just want to do it for the sake of doing it. I don't know, curiosity. That's not strong enough to get consistent results. You got to know what your point and your purpose is, right? Correspondence, consistency, clarity of purpose, resonance versus dissonance. And see, this takes away good versus evil. Good versus evil is not a platform that you can get consistent results on, because you'll be clashing over morality. And morality does not have a place in what we're doing. So understand what I'm saying. I'm not saying that it's okay to hurt people and do bad things. What I'm saying is that when you're working with your internal subjective nature, this isn't about good versus evil. This is about, do I resonate with this, or am I dissonant with this? So any other type of spirit, there are people who can work with this spirit, and there are people who do not have an easy time working with the same spirit. It's because one group of people resonates with this spirit for whatever reasons. It could be cultural, it could be whatever. And then there's another group of people who are dissonant with that spirit, so they can't work with it efficiently, right? It's not that that spirit is evil. You either resonate with it or you don't. Right, so correspondence, consistency, clarity of purpose, resonance versus dissonance, context versus content, right? So understanding that whenever you're dealing with anything, right, especially when it comes to magic, and this is dealing with the art of being able to change the states of consciousness, to change matter, there has to be a distinction between what is the content being changed and what is the overall context, because the context is the background. The content is what fills the space. Being able to distinguish the difference between the two is what makes consistency of success possible. All right, correspondence, consistency, clarity of purpose, resonance versus dissonance, content versus context, useful and appropriate, self-explanatory. Instead of asking yourself a million questions of what should I do next, ask yourself, is this next step useful and appropriate? Then, of course, state control, maintain your frame. Once you figured out what you're doing and you have employed your rituals, your techniques, your sigils, whatever, you've got to keep your mind in the space where you know that you're successful from beginning to end. If you falter and you waver, you change everything. Now, of course, there's going to be emotional ups and downs. Of course, life happens. But overall, ultimately, subconsciously, you must maintain your frame. You must maintain your state. Okay, so I know this is a lot of information. This is why I'm going to be talking about it for a long time. Because, again, like I said, consistency and repetition is what penetrates. So the ontology, which is consciousness over matter. The methodology, which are the 7 pillars that I just described. Authority, and this is where we talk about self-deification, understanding that I am God, and being able to define that, not just use as an ego statement, but being able to understand exactly what that means, right? And this, again, goes back to the consciousness over matter. We understand what consciousness is in respect to matter, then that statement isn't such a scary thing to say. And with that statement, with understanding that statement, and with it being true and honest, there comes a level of balance. There comes a level of elemental balance, right? And this is why you start having good luck. This is why you start having synchronicities. This is why things seem to go into your favor, because the elemental forces that are behind life, you are beginning to balance and harmonize those forces within yourself. So as you balance them within yourself, they're balanced on the outside as well. And what this looks like, what this is represented by, is that good luck, are those synchronicities. And then, of course, there's celestial balance. And this is taking it a step further. It's not just good luck in your surroundings. Now it becomes good luck throughout your life path. And not just good luck. What I'm saying is being in harmony and in balance with life. Right place at the right time. All the time. So there is the ontology. There is the methodology, which are the 7 pillars. There's the authority. And then there's the communication. And again, that's what we're going to get into today. We talk about the communication. There has to be a certain framework of communication with what we call the spiritual realm, with the inner planes, with the etheric plane, astral plane, etc. And what this communication entails is a symbolic language. There has to be a way to deal with and to work with the inner forces. Now, it's not going to be done through the 5 senses directly. You're not going to grab the energy of abundance and pull it to yourself. It has to be symbolized. It has to be anchored in some form so that you can apply it and work upon that anchor. When you work upon that anchor, that symbol, that sigil, subconsciously you realize that you're working with the energy that it represents to you. Again, this is the main thing behind ritual. All ritual. This is what ritual is. Okay, so that's the aspect of communication, knowing how to do that, and also having a certain level of concentration, certain level of meditation, because to create an anchor that represents an energy that you're dealing with, to be able to do that takes concentration, takes focus. You've got to actually sit and make the connection between your subconscious mind and that anchor. Otherwise, it's pretend and make believe. Now, pretend and make-believe is a pathway to results, but only if the connections are made between the symbols that you're utilizing. All right, so out of the 5 different categories that I mentioned, we talked about ontology, which is consciousness over matter, the lay of the land. We talked about methodology, which are the 7 pillars of the Magus, right? We talked about the authority, which is understanding I am God, and knowing what that means. Not an ego statement, but an understanding of consciousness over matter. We talked about communication, and that's being able to communicate with these inner planes through symbols. And those symbols are created through creating an anchor through concentration and meditation. And the 5th category of things to understand to have successful results is energy manipulation. And this is being able to work with the etheric plane, to understand the purpose of the chakra points, to understand how to go into trance, to understand how to build energy up, how to balance energy, and how to disperse it. Knowing the in and the outflow of what we call prana, of this force that connects the thing and the essence of that thing. There's a force in between, right? Consciousness over matter, and there's a force in between. Knowing how to work with that force in between is energy work. Okay, so we will move forward here a little bit further. Alora, how are you today?
Hey, Trav, everyone. I'm good. I'm soaking it all in.
Cool. So today, I wanted to talk about the sigil that will solve all of your problems. And as I said before, it's not a specific sigil that anybody can just use and it's just going to make everything better. That doesn't make sense. However, if you take into understanding all that stuff that I just said, the answer should be clear, right? You should be able to identify the energy, make the connection with the sigil, and then apply it. So when we get down to real life, we get down to what we're doing here today, every day. Take a look at your life, right? So first of all, if the title of this video is something that is appealing to you, that means that there is something that you don't feel is at its best, something that's broken that needs to be fixed, something that you would rather have differently. Whatever the problem is, it's different for everybody. So the first step is to identify that. If your life is not where you want it to be, identify what exactly the problem is. And if you can't identify what exactly the problem is, try your best to get as close as you can, right? Try to get as close as you can. any number of situations, right? The important thing is to be able to sit down, identify it, right? The next thing you're going to do is you're going to figure out what type of energy is behind that situation, right? What type of energy is behind the problem? So if you've got a money issue, you've got to be able to find a way to identify what the energy is behind that. And this is vague because this is subjective to each person. It's impossible to be specific for everyone, right? Because this is a public platform. There's a lot of people here. So to keep it as general as possible, you got to be able to identify the energy behind your problem. It's not the person that's upsetting you. It's not the job. It's not whatever the physical observable object is. It's not that. That's only a representative of a specific type of energy. So what you do is you identify that energy. When I say energy, I'm talking about flow. I'm talking about pattern. I'm talking about pressure. We talk about pressure. And if you are in the membership, then I released a video this morning that talks about this as well. Talked about the 3 steps of creating this talisman and utilizing the pressure behind what these symbols represent. So if you didn't get the alert, go ahead and check that out after this video, or right now, it's up to you. When we talk about pressure, all of the experiences in our life exert a certain type of pressure upon our consciousness, right? When something happens that makes us feel uncomfortable, we're experiencing the pressure of that situation. Some events have happened to us in the past that have exerted so much pressure that that pressure echoes even to the present day, and it affects all of our decisions and everything that we do. Dion Fortune said in the mystical Kabbalah that if she could sum up God in one word, she would say that God is pressure, right? You may recall that from the early chapters of the book. So for her to say that, it always stuck out in my mind. It's something important. What is pressure? Pressure is force. Pressure is power, right? Think about in high school, right? The popular group of people, they exerted a certain pressure because others wanted to be like them. So they experienced that pressure and they translated that as, I must conform to this pressure, right? Let's think about this pressure. Think about companies when they're promoting their products to you, when they're trying to sell to you, they're exerting a certain type of pressure upon you. And it's up to you whether you want to conform with that pressure or resist it. You think about the government, it exerts a certain pressure upon the peoples of the citizens of the country. Peer pressure, right? There's all sorts of types of pressure that govern our lives. We don't live in a vacuum. Literally everything we do is a result of us experiencing different types of pressures. And there's larger pressures that keeps expanding, right? There's the weather. There are the way that the planet turns each and every day. The seasons, right? The sun exerts a certain type of pressure, 4 types of pressure throughout a 365-day cycle, right? Sometimes the pressure makes it to where it's summertime. Sometimes the pressure of the sun makes it to where it's wintertime. Let's think about the moon. The moon exerts different types of pressure depending on what week it is. Under a full moon, you'll really understand that there's exerted pressure that causes people to behave a certain way. Under a new moon, there's a certain pressure, right? This is lunar magic. Okay, think about astrology and the planets, right? It's not just floating rocks in the sky. It's not that there's these mysterious planets that are making people do things. That's a very elementary school way to try to think about it. The same way that you can drop a pebble in water and there's a ripple out based on the pressure of the rock upon the medium of that water. In that same way, as these planets move and turn, they exert a certain type of pressure upon their surroundings. Now, the pressure isn't as dense as the sun or the moon, but it's still there, right? It still affects you and me, the same way that your childhood still affects you and me, even though it happened so long ago, it's still there. So what I'm trying to say here is the situation that you're experiencing that is no good, that you don't like, this has been built up through different types of pressure. And now it has culminated into its own new type of pressure that is exerted upon you. This is what I mean by identify the energy behind that situation. Let me know if you understand what I said so far in the chat.
It's very clear. I actually have an example about what you were just talking about.
Mm-hmm.
And that had to do with certain beliefs in my family about work and money. So I took financial literacy into my own hands because I needed to learn how to do things differently. Since I found out that I was feeling stressed, really stressed and pressured about certain ways of thinking, certain patterns that I was seeing manifesting. So what I did was trace the effect back to the cause itself. And when I did that and found out what was that, I immediately readjusted the framework. And suddenly, by doing that kind of thing, the manifesting effect ceased to exist. What I now had was, in essence, the cause or the quality of something existent within that I didn't feel the compulsion to act on it. But if I chose to do something with it now, the effect would actually be the manifestation of the same quality of the framework. So if I now have a sounder understanding of how to work with money and how to go about wealth, then that's exactly what I'm going to get as the effect. Okay. And if before I was thinking about doing something to then be, like doing something to get something, now it shifted to first being to then do. I mean, being with the accompanying capacity and ability to do something by choice. So I shifted even my understanding of myself around by first embodying the state I wanted and then going and performing the action, like linking that thing to the external action instead of going about something external first to experience something internal as if I lacked something. But the thing is that it's inside me. The quality of that thing is inside me, and that is the thing I channel into my physical activities and actions. My goodness, it shifted something that has sent me completely on a new way of operating. And I wasn't entirely unaware of that before, but it's just that now it depends upon me to really first channel the state I want to then go and perform an action. It's like it's not depending on something external in order for me to feel or experience a certain way. But now it's lucidly aware of it. It's now I who decides what kind of state I'm going to be at any given time, and then go and perform an action should I choose to act on something. It's like now the focus is more so an internal awareness than attaching my consciousness or attaching my awareness to sense objects. It shifted something like that, but it's getting a little bit of, it takes a little bit of effort to get used to that new dynamic. I mean, consciously speaking.
Yeah, that's awesome. And you said something really key there. You said that I went from doing something to get something. You shifted from that old dynamic of doing something to get something, and you shifted that, you said, to being in order to do.
Exactly.
That's a high level shift right there, right? Because
we
come up thinking we have to do something to get something. That's the law of the material plane, right? And that works, right, on the material plane. But if we're working on a higher level to affect the material plane, on the higher level, it's not about doing something. It's about being that thing so that the trickle down effect happens, so that the material plane corresponds with what you are. That's what I'm talking about with authority. I think that's a great explanation of authority. Spiritual authority. Shit, I'm gonna write that down, honestly. That was a good one. The way that you framed it.
That came about through a long round of shadow work.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. Okay. And I also want to say, while people are here and engaged and listening, we just finished doing the book study of Magic, Its Ritual, Power, and Purpose by W.E. Butler. Phenomenal book. It's 60 pages. We finished in 3 weeks. If you were there for it, if you got a copy, you'll probably look back into this because it was awesome. But it doesn't stop there. That book is actually part of a trilogy. And in a few days, Saturday, we're going to continue with part 2, which is The Magician, His Training and Work. And where the first book was really an introduction to the style of magic that W.E. Butler teaches, because every teacher has their own style. It isn't like there's one definite style that is the right way or the wrong way. We study in order to absorb different types of styles to make our own. That's the only way to do it. Well, that's, I would say, the best way to do it. Other people would say that you go up under one specific teacher and study them religiously. Your way is your way. But my way over here, I'm eclectic and I like to absorb what works no matter who's teaching it. What works no matter who's teaching it. But this particular book, The Magician, is safe to read. Number one, because nowhere in this book does it say don't read it on the internet. And number two, he's very Jedi. He's very good. And for the public, that's easy to digest. But don't get me wrong, this is phenomenal information. And this is where we will be Saturday, 8 p.m. Eastern time. Be there or be part of the solar flare. Missed a few people in the chat. Peace to Sunshine Chick. Always good to see you. Peace to MC Maestro. Peace Nuru. Peace Matthew Watson. Peace Lance Benefield. Peace Alex Cuckoo. Peace Bella 85. I think I already said peace to you. Greetings. Be more high. Be more high. Terrio Cool Whip. Peace. Peace to everybody who has joined. So look, hit the like button if you're enjoying this content. Looks like we still have more people here than actual likes. So let's get that up. All right, so let's continue with what we were talking about here as far as this pressure and understanding the forces behind your situation. So this video is about the sigil that will solve all your problems. Now, I titled it that way on purpose because I know that somebody's like, hey, I've got a problem. What sigil do I use? What candle do I use? What demon do I summon? And that's a good way to open the door. Now that the door is open, the truth is the sigil has to be created by you. It has to be created by you. So let's talk about that process. I went through this whole thing explaining pressure, right? There's pressure put upon us by life. There's internal pressure, right? Through your body and your mind. There's external pressure through your environment. And there's celestial pressure from the whole mix. That's what I said. And in the book Samkhya Darshan by Swami Niranjanananda Saraswati, he talks about how before somebody makes that final decision to say, you know what, I've got to find a way out of suffering. I have got to find a way out of the suffering no matter what. Before you hit that point, you have to first endure your limit of inner suffering, external suffering, and celestial suffering. You have to hit a point where it's like, no more of this. I'm ready to do whatever it takes to end my suffering. So once that pressure becomes overwhelming, when we talk about sigil magic and chaos magic, the number one step is to identify the situation. The second step is to identify the pressure behind that situation, to understand the energy behind that situation, right? So I know people say energy and it sounds vague and fluffy, but I talked about pressure to make it more clear. Once you understand where that pressure is coming from, the next step that you have to do is to create a representative, a tangible, apprehensible representative of that pressure. So what do I mean by that? I mean something that you can either see, hear, taste, smell, touch. There's got to be some type of anchor, some type of symbol that you use to represent that thing. Now, once you establish the anchor with the energy, right? That's the thing now. We're establishing the anchor with that pressure that you've identified. The next step is, right, we can set that aside. Now we're going to do the same process on the other end. Identify something that you would rather have instead. Identify the ideal, right? And it begins by visualizing what that ideal looks like, what that ideal feels like. What are you doing in that ideal state? What are you doing in that ideal place? Right? And once you've got that vision set up, you go behind it and you identify the energy behind it, the pressure behind it, right? Same process. And this is what you will do for the rest of your magical career. This is all that we do. Maybe you didn't know it before. Maybe you don't know it yet. But this is what we do if you're having consistent results. Once it's identified, you then create an anchor and a symbol for it. All right? So tell me what happens next. What happens next? Now that you have a symbol of the thing you don't want, and now that you have a symbol of the thing you do want, what do you do next? I'm taking answers in the chat and in the Zoom.
Just be. The next step is to just be. I realized that if I kept asking myself the question, what do I want, as in thinking that I lacked something, that created a sort of confusion that I didn't know how to answer. So when I shifted from doing to be, to being to then do, that just required that I decided right in the spot to be something, to experience something, to then perform an action. So, oh my goodness. This thing about just being first and then doing this, it's not as I would have imagined I would be or being or doing. It's still very strange in a certain way to just be, because that doesn't really require anything that complicated. It's not okay, so you don't have to struggle anymore, just be and then do it. Now things have become more peaceful, more pleasurable, more delightful in a way. If before you somehow believed or had some notion that you had to struggle through something, or that there was something, there was the quality of harshness to something that you really had to grind to get something, it takes a little bit of effort, or should you say just be and observe and let it be, to recalibrate yourself to this new mode of being. You really can access those states that you want, independent of people, independent of external objects. It's all within you.
Mm-hmm.
And it's all dependent of you deciding to access them. And just let them flow as you do whatever you intend to do with them. So in that case, what's the next step once you first are, and then do something with that? Just observe what will be then the next most appropriate state for you to put yourself in, and then perform the next action. Because you will continue to be as you decide to be. And that's the very first step you will take from here on. Should you also remember it as well.
If I could throw in an answer here. I think, so I think what I would do, or what seems to be most appropriate or useful, if you're having, so just to be clear, you've programmed one of your symbols for all of the things you don't want after you've determined the pattern and the pressure behind it, and you've channeled it into one symbol. And then with the thing that you do want, you've channeled it into another. So you have two symbols right here that represent one thing that you don't want and all the trouble behind that, or resistance, and the other one that you do want. I would use, in my head first, I thought combine them, but now I'm thinking I would probably use the negative symbol, so the so-called negative symbol, to clear out the negativity or subconscious negativity that I've attached to what I do want. And I'll use the sigil for what I want in order to continue building that future vision, that motivation, attaching the new values and the new picture to it. So that what was once my resistance now becomes a tool for me to release all negative attachments I have that's creating this resistance to what I do want.
Okay. So we've got a symbol that represents everything that we are not happy with today. And we've got a symbol that represents what we would rather have instead. Now, there's a lot of different answers in the chat. Some people are asking questions. Some people have made a statement as far as what they do. Big difference, right? And I think that's pretty cool. And I'm tempted to leave it right there. I probably should, honestly, because what I've stated is enough. And the next steps would depend on your style as a magus, right? I would definitely agree with the people who said, take the time with that negative symbol and begin to remove the attachments that brought you here in the first place. Because remember what I said about the pressure. This didn't just all of a sudden happen. It happened through a series of life events. Now, those series of life events did not happen to you, right? Maybe it may seem like one or two did. That's fine. But a series of life events, you've got some involvement in that, right? If nothing else, you've got involvement in how you responded to the initial event. But if there's a series of events, each one of those events left its own pressure, left its own mark that led you to the situation. So it isn't, I wouldn't say, sufficient to simply throw it away. Throwing away the symbol does cast it out of your conscious mind, but there's subconscious roots. Just like the mushrooms that sprout out in the ground after it rains, they always seem to sprout out in the same place. Why is that? Because underneath that grass, there's a network of roots, a network of mycelium. And all it takes is the right weather to cause that same network to sprout out some mushrooms on the surface. So that symbol that you have, we could call it the mushroom, the fruit. And I think it's good to understand that there are roots. The subconscious mind works in symbols, not in words. Works in symbols. Identifying your problem and anchoring it in a pictorial symbol allows you to be able to have your subconscious mind have something more to work with instead of, oh, I don't like this. 2023 was trash. This year sucks. You know, I wish I had more money. I wish I had more love. I wish I was more healthy. I wish. Instead of just saying that, you have a symbol that you can work with now. Now, what if you repeat the process with those roots? And what if you were able to symbolize uprooting this thing? I'm giving an example, right? What I'm saying ultimately is identifying the problem and identifying the ideal solution is the beginning. Deep transformation is never a quick snap of the finger. However, having the right tools can allow anyone to get the job done. You can find success if you just swap them out. If you can even do what's called a swish pattern, whereas where you go into a trance, right, or a meditation, and you take the two scenes and you play one and let the emotions come up, and you swap out the other and let the emotions come up, and you let them swap out faster and faster and faster and faster. And what you'll find is that the positive emotions associated with the ideal situation will begin to override the negative emotions of the bad symbol. And as you're swishing them like this back and forth, allow the bad pattern to turn gray, to get smaller, to in some way diminish, and allow yourself to focus on the new pattern. And just like Lasange said, be that. Look at who you are while you're experiencing and visualizing this ideal situation. Be that. Step into your current situation that you have right now and be the person that you are when you visualize the ideal situation. That sigil that you created right there, anytime that you're going through your issue and the overwhelm, the weight, and the pressure starts to weigh you down, that's where you go and take that anchor and you focus on it and you be it, right? You can do the swish pattern like I said. You can uproot the fungi from the negative. There's all manner of things. This is a toy box, right? And I've just given you two toys to play with, the negative and the positive. You can create many others related to them, but this works in metaphor. This is how the subconscious mind works, in metaphor. So if I'm thinking of the negative, like mushrooms and roots, then my job now is to uproot the whole soil, break it all up and replace it with something new. If I'm going to use it as a metaphor of two movies, right? Two DVDs, and I watch one movie and I watch the other movie and I don't like this movie, I can imagine that this movie fails at the box office, right? All the actors get caught up in some type of scandal, so they never work again. Use your imagination and allow the metaphors to help you break this thing down. This is how you communicate to your subconscious mind with the sigil that will solve all your problems. Was this clear? Does this sound like some bullshit? Let me know.
No, man, it's really clear, and it has a lot to do with imagination and how deeply you can go with it.
Yes.
It's
exactly.
This is your imagination. You're working with your imagination doing this.
Yes. Because I could make an entire step-by-step thing to do, and it could work. But I think it'd be really cool if you sat down with your issue, because you know it more intimately than I do. You can come up with the right metaphor. My metaphor will work as best as I can guess for you. I know what works for me, right? I enjoy mushrooms. I know a thing or two about mushrooms, so that metaphor can work for me. We all watch movies, so the movie thing could work for you. What do you do? What do you know intimately? Find a metaphor within what you do intimately and apply it to this metaphor of having the negative situation and the ideal situation.
Yeah, it's interesting when thinking about the pressure buildup in relation to both of these, or to using that in both of these circumstances of having the two symbols represent different things. Because when I think of pressure, I think of, that overwhelming feeling, what that is. Yes, there is like a density to it, but it's created through an emotional context. At least that's how I see it. It's a strong buildup of emotion that you feel. Either someone else is projecting it or you're projecting it. So when I think of the emotional pressure that we have in this one symbol that represents something negative, and then there's the something positive too, it's like I sort of get curious as to how in particular would you use it in order as a tool in order to delete the subconscious negativity? Would you just slowly replace the pressure? Would you work on releasing it bit by bit from the sigil? Would you make it stronger? What would you do with the pressure build? into this thing that you've used to channel all this energy into? Would you keep adding to it? What would you do?
I think that's a good question, because that allows now for some creativity and some games. I'm coming up with this on the spot right now. So what I would do is I would take the sigil that I've drawn of the negative situation, and let's say I'm going to go with my metaphor of the mushrooms, right? I understand that this is the fruit, but now I want to get to the roots. So what I would do is sit down and do some shadow work. Specifically, I begin thinking about everything that led up to where I am now, everything that brought me here. Because this, in a way, this is something that I've had to do recently. This is something that I had to go through for the past couple of months, where I had this feeling that I was here, and then I had suddenly woken up and now I'm down here, right? And that felt horrible. But what I realized is if I'm not going to do anything about this, I'm really not going to get back to where I want to be. And it's a weird kind of difficulty knowing everything that I know, yet still I find myself in a place where I don't want to be. So what happens is I had to identify where I was, and I had to explain how I knew I was there, right? I knew I was there because I was meditating every day. I was doing my mantras every day. I was eating a vegan diet, right? I have all these different outward expressions that let me know where I was versus where I became. And then I did the same thing for the low place that I was at. I identified all these different things that let me know I was at this low place. So what I would do in this particular scenario with the sigils is I would take that sigil and I would go through the step-by-step process of what led me here. And I'd start to, so I'd go to the first aspect of what I felt led me here. Like say we could say it took 7 steps for me to get here to this low place. So I'd start with the 7th step and I'd visualize what happened there. And instead of saying, damn, I shouldn't have let this happen, I went too far, instead of experiencing those guilty emotions and punishing myself, instead of that, I'd observe it, I'd watch it, I'd let it pass, and I'd give myself compassion. How do I give myself compassion? I understand, you know what? I understand why you as a human being, right, still living life, chose to do this. I understand the influences that led you to make this decision. And there's no judgment here. I just understand what led you to this place. And I'd rip off a piece of the sigil, right? Might chew it up, I might burn it, might throw it away. I'd go to the 6th step of what led me to that point. And I'd experience it, I'd watch it in my mind, and I'd say, no judgment. I understand the influences that led you to create this scenario, to make this decision. And I'd tear off a piece and destroy it. I think that would be a good way to go through that process. All the way to the point where the sigil is destroyed. So you didn't simply just rip it up, you didn't just crumble it, you didn't just burn it. You took the time to uproot what led you to the scenario in the first place.
That's awesome. That's actually what I was envisioning as well, sort of like what if you could heal the sigil? Like
okay.
that was your healing mode. So like one thing I've been really exploring when it comes to especially dealing with emotions, then the power that we have behind that, identifying that energy, has been uncovering the values that I have attached to things. So what I've become aware of is that our resistance that we have towards something that we want is really a subconscious behavior or pattern that is acting out because it wants to protect us in some way. It actually thinks it's fulfilling a need that we have. So instead of, just as you were saying, instead of criticizing this pressure, this buildup, start to acknowledge what values are trying to be expressed. What is this thing trying to do for me? And what is this energy trying to do for me? And I was envisioning, like, if you have this sigil here that's embodied all of your resistance, all of those negative attachments, and you visualize it as something that is like that clumsy friend that's trying to help you. and you help the clumsy friend and giving them an assignment as for what they need in order to accomplish their task in helping you. And as you go through that, you start to add in pressure, right? But from the values that were lacking in that resistance was trying to find. So say the resistance I have towards something is because I don't feel like I'm enough to be able to accomplish this. I don't feel like I'm enough. And that base value that's attached to that is trying to find connection and to feel loved and appreciated. So every time I feel loved and appreciated, I take that energy and I put that into that sigil, almost as if I'm like feeding it what it needs, and then allowing that to start to express itself into my conscious life. So it's like no longer is there negativity attached to this. Now there's only liberation that comes from it. And I feel like that's something that's kind of acting in with your tearing off the bits of that sigil. It's like you're releasing all of this old pressure buildup because you're replacing it with the needs being met. Which is beautiful, because then you have this other sigil here of that positive visualization. So by healing this old one, you're now actively building a foundation for this already formed image, for this already manifested thought form of what is to come, of the ideal situation. You're giving yourself that foundation then.
Beautiful, beautiful. I can just see everybody in the chat having their scenario and going through what you just said with it, or going through with what I said with it. Because honestly, sometimes the ritual starts before the ritual. You could just listen to what Alora just said and do it in your head. And then when this video is over, actually do it physically. And you did it twice. And you could do it again. Every time you feel, okay, so like you said, in that example, and that's good too, because notice how what we're discussing here also is going to the roots, not the surface level. It's never the thing that you're dealing with. It's always the force behind it. It's the pressure behind it. It's the roots, the root network behind it. And in the particular situation you described, what was behind it was not feeling like you're enough to accomplish the thing, right? And hell, I could probably say for my situation that might have been it too. But if you find the root issue, right, then you identify the corresponding need. What is it that I really need that's making me feel this way? And if you're able to identify that, you can use that with the sigil that you've created, and you could give it to that sigil, just like what you just said. And every time you feel this feeling, you can apply it to that sigil. And how does this relate to pressure also? So we talked about pressure leading up to certain events, to culminating in certain events. What I've learned, this year was that the future is just as impactful as the past. The same way that something serious or important happened in the past and it still affects us to this day, it goes the other way too. There's things in your future that are so impactful that they infect you and you're feeling it. They affect you and you're feeling it now. You ever feel called or compelled to do something you don't know why? You ever feel like you're just drawn to do something and you do it, and this is like a life-changing? There's been plenty of times where I have introduced certain herbs and supplements or books or like different things in my life that I got from like a random advertisement, or somebody just randomly mentioned it, or I come across it in some weird way, but it has this feeling about it like, maybe I should follow up on this. I don't know why. Don't know anything about this. Maybe I should follow up on it. And then you follow up on it and you realize like, this literally fits in with my life so perfectly. In fact, I don't know how the hell I've been alive without it. The future can affect us just as deeply as the past can, right? Pressure both ways. Because really, when you zoom out and you think about the subtle planes, time doesn't work the same way that it does in the physical. In the physical plane, you have to be in this moment and you have to gradually go to the next one 1 second at a time. on these higher planes, as you zoom out, you'll find that the past, the present, and the future are a little bit closer knit. And the more that you zoom out, bigger chunks of past, present, and future are densely packed together. So what I'm saying here is the same way that your decisions and the things that happened in your life led to that negative situation. Whenever you do any aspect of what we're talking about here tonight, and you take this ideal situation and you be that, you experience that, and you allow yourself to be as if, what you're creating right there is pressure. You're now creating an influence on your environment. And if you continually do that, that influence will continue to affect the environment. The same with that going to the gym every day for months or training will affect your physical body. The same way that walking up and down a certain pathway in the forest will create a permanent path in the ground. The same way that if you focus on that ideal situation and allow that pressure, allow yourself to be that, it by virtue will begin to change this negative situation. So this stuff isn't just make believe. It isn't cross your fingers and wish. I've never talked about cross your fingers and hope. What I'm talking about is stuff that works.
Yeah, and I think about when you mentioned that the future is impactful as your past. I think we have to constantly remind ourselves that time isn't linear. I read somewhere that time is the expansion of existence in the eternal state of becoming. So whether it's coming or going, whether we're moving toward it or away from it, it's not ever going to be linear. So when we become aware of this power and of this pressure, I think a lot of us think that we have to act consecutively with it when it comes to creating things that we want. And that actually limits the influence that we have and the type of pressure that we can build up. But if we were to only think within the emotional context or in the most general, we're getting to the most subtle levels of matter. So we're getting to that higher place, that dormancy state of something before it manifests. And that's where we kind of get all of our information for even how we visualize our past or our future. That's where everything is being stored. So I think as magicians, right, we need to remember that when we're talking about pressure, when we're talking about present, future, time in general, we're talking about an expansion and the state of becoming something, not necessarily working within a linear fashion in order to achieve it.
We can even say that this ties into that awesome quote that Lasange said about how, she replaced the paradigm of doing something to get something with being something, right? And allowing the environment to wrap around that. I think that's the same thing as what you're talking about. How in linear time, the time of the manifest physical dimension, we have to do something to get something. We have to plant a seed in order to get a harvest. We have to work that way. But applying higher laws, applying the laws of the inner planes, it has everything to do about being that. Because like you said, with the time not being linear there, you don't have to do something to get something. You have to be something to get something. Like, if you've never had this happen before, this could sound ridiculous. But a lot of us know that sometimes a certain situation or a certain result calls for you to be the role, to play the part that receives that thing. Right? Has anybody not had a situation where you just innately know, all right, this is time for me to be this. I need to step up to this.
Absolutely.
It sometimes kind of seems counterintuitive to work that way, but I think we should start working that way more than the way of doing to get.
That was quite a shift, because even thinking about doing things in a strictly linear way was causing me confusion. I was confused about, like, I kept asking myself the question of what do I want? What do I want? And try to go about that as if I lacked something, but the things I had to be the thing that I wanted to experience, not do to then be, but just to be to then do.
Mm-hmm. Be to do.
That
Would
brought
address the part.
clarity. Mm-hmm.
Marco Powers says that's like those 7, 14, and 21 day spells where you add something to it every day. A piggy bank has the same effect, or a money jar, adding a little bit of energy every day, adding more pressure every day. Yeah, and that's something that you could even use for a wealth manifestation, right? When you see a piggy bank, and if someone were to say, "Oh, use this piggy bank to manifest wealth," the conscious mind is going to say, "That's absolutely ridiculous. That's stupid. I'm never going to listen to anything from this person again." But think about everything that we just talked about today. You could use that piggy bank as an anchor, as a symbol, tie it up to this concept of wealth manifestation or abundance or whatever it is. And your ritual now is to put, a penny in there, a quarter, put something in there, whatever you got. It's not about how much, it's about the process of adding to yourself. And who do you have to be in order for that to work? Who do you have to be in order for you to take that seriously? You have to be somebody that believes that this is on its way to you. You're not going to do that if you're not someone who believes it's going to work. Rolla says, I have had issues with meditation too. It helped to meditate with tools like enchants, sigil in my mind, and doing the path working. Lucifer and Hidden Demons is a good book to start with visualizing. Absolutely, I agree with that. It is a great book that can open up some of the imaginative faculties in this area of work. Definitely.
I asked my own equivalent of your question in the past live chats about what kind of person did you have to be in order for magic to be consistently efficient and for that information to be true and accurate. So for me, it was, what did I want most in my life for which I would willingly discipline my emotions and self to enjoy the outcome of having accomplished it? Because with the old paradigm of first having to do something to then experience the reward of something, at some point my momentum crashed, because all there was for me there was work, and I wasn't seeing a reward at the end of all that work. And that was pretty much the paradigm that I have for my entire life, because from somewhere I had acquired this idea that at some point after all the work that I did, I was going to be rewarded, but that was not directed internally. I was expecting that reward from somewhere outside of me, like perhaps a society, a career, culture, family, or interpersonal relationships. But even if I actually decided to put my effort and energy into those things, I realized that those things still required work. So I wasn't really seeing that reward at the end of something. So when I did the shadow work, things flipped around to first be and then do. And what I realized is that when I embody the state that I want to experience, even as the outcome, I can do any activity with the quality of that state and make the activity itself pleasurable. That is the reward itself. It plays out through the whole activity all through the end. So I don't have to be thinking about, oh, so I have to do this awful thing right now so that I can experience this reward later. I can give the reward myself right now as the state that I want to experience, and then go through the activity and enjoy it all the way. So it's redirected internally. Now the focus is myself, instead of depending on something outside of me to give me something that can delight me. I become my own delight, and I spread that delight through the things I do.
Yeah, I like that. Giving your, because you know, we learned that whole reward punishment system as children, right? And even though it, you know, there is reward for doing certain things and punishment from doing certain things, the way that we construct it in our mind, you know, sometimes can be twisted from our parents. Like, there's people who have used food as reward, and that may lead to weight issues. There's parents who have used, you know, all types of things for reward and punishment, and that leads us to treat life in that same way. Even for myself, it was revolutionary when certain persons suggested what you had mentioned there, as far as giving yourself the reward in the beginning. It kind of felt wrong at first. It felt, you know, I kind of felt a little bit guilty about doing that. But I did it, and I found that it kind of, at least for me, it energized me and gave me the energy I needed to continue, instead of dreading it the whole way through and wishing it was over so I could hurry up and get to the end. And what I found is that doing that for myself, it requires a little bit of balance. I do need to delay gratification for me to get certain things done, but I found that if I delay all gratification, I can exhaust myself. So I think there's a way to take what you said and really customize it for your particular system of reward and punishment. I think a lot of good, extremely good information came out in today's chat. I see that we have quite a few people in the chat. If you guys enjoyed this so far, hit the like button, and I'd like for you to let me know in the chat what you've learned about this, or what's your takeaway. What are you going to do with this negative symbol and this good symbol? Let me know.
I'm going to pay more attention to my aspect between Saturn and the moon, because what I was just talking about was in relation to this. Saturn is work, 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 you have to do the work, and my moon was screaming to have its emotions indulged, and self-care, really. Well, the moon in this case, and also Venus. It's like I cannot simply just ignore the pleasure or the delight of enjoying something specific, but I needed to understand how it was that it could work for me. So before, it was a certain kind of duality of having to do the work, constantly work, and then be as if you're expecting some kind of reward. I even asked myself, so when do I actually experience pleasure out of this? But if I actually make that pleasure thing part of the work itself, then it works better for me in that way than having that sort of duality. It was a matter, it was a matter of flipping that thing around to first being, and then do something. I can become the embodiment of delight now and enjoy myself all the way. I never have to be expecting a reward for that when I myself become that and then go about it.
Yeah, I think there's some good key passages that you used in that, and that was becoming the embodiment of delight or of joy, right? It's like it's kind of going back to that time thing, where it's the art of becoming. So we delay gratification because we know that it takes work to get the result that we want. But what if we were to see ourselves as already being what we want, and these are just the steps that someone who is that or who has that takes? And can we find joy and meaning and pleasure in that?
Yes,
So when we do that, the steps to take in order to create the thing that we want to create doesn't seem so taxing, because it's just kind of part of the deal. It's like, yeah, of course I'm a doctor. Of course I'm going to school. Or of course it's like, of course I'm an entrepreneur. That's why I'm putting in this work. And so then all of a sudden it kind of opens up a creative outlet, because you're now attaching the positive things, the positive emotions, the positive pressure to what it is that you're doing.
that's it exactly, Alora. And wait, there was something to go with it. The thing is that when you rearrange the way you function in this way, you place the pleasure in the work itself, then the work itself becomes like a natural thing. It's like the corresponding cause that gives the corresponding effect. So you don't have to think too much about it. It just happens naturally, it flows. And that's the smoothness of it. That's the pleasurable smoothness that comes into it.
Right. And I think that is something that you can program into your negative symbol. I think that's something that's a way of how you can start combining your negative into that positive, or releasing the negative sigil, or whatever you choose to do with that. I think that's kind of the energy that you bring to it, and in order to create that result. It's that neutralizing of what you were resistance to when it came to those steps, by becoming what it is that you wanted. That person doing those steps.
Bella 85 says, I've picked my symbols and I've just put into my positive one. Everything right now in my life is going great. After the accident I had, it's like good things started happening, which is weird. Take action is what I say. Take action. I mean, you don't have to sit down in a quiet place to do this. You could literally do this right now. You know what's troubling you, and you know what you want. You could do this in a flash, or you can take your time with it. Or you can do it now and then go back and do it some more. But either way, if you found this information helpful, take action. Don't just sit down and say, yeah, that was cool, and then forget about it tomorrow. Do something. If you really want change. Sometimes we're not ready for change. And it's embarrassing to admit, but sometimes subconsciously we're not ready to move out because a part of us knows we need to learn this lesson. However, if you are somebody who's ready to move on to the next aspect of life, take action on this thing. This is good information. This isn't just like casual talking about the weather and the sports and the latest celebrity scandal. This is some stuff that can literally change your life. So take action on it. All right?
Self-awareness. You need self-awareness in order to remember to put yourself in the state you want for every single time you fall off.
I didn't expect this, but yeah, this feels good. I'm gonna go back and add some more to mine. You guys have given me some more creative ways to explore this inner ritual.
Yeah, me too, because I've been exploring that idea of, when they say you build, like a lot of manifestors, and it is kind of true to an extent, but they'll say like you build up this pressure and then you release it. And so you build up everything that you want, all your visualization, all this kind of stuff, emotional context, you build it up, and then you send it out to the universe and you release it. And then you just go, you're supposed to just go about your business and it comes to you, right? When you least expect it. And it's kind of like one of those classic formulas that everyone sort of is like, but that letting go thing really does seem to hold true. And when we talk about pressure and we talk about, programming sigils and stuff like that to hold these types of emotional pressures, including the negative, it's making me think as well that this is all a process of building something up and letting it go. Like, even with these sigils, we're building up all of this emotional pressure and we're channeling them into an object. So we're releasing it, but into a specific object, which then further kind of gives us control as to how that thing, I guess, gives us more influence on how that thing starts to manifest. Not necessarily the specifics, but like what kind of feedback we're going to be receiving. But I do think it's interesting to kind of explore that letting go concept of like, what exactly am I letting go? How am I letting go? What techniques am I going to use in order to let go of all this pressure that I have, so then I know that I can receive what it is that I put out.
Acknowledgement. Usually, for example, when I do shadow work on something that seems that has been troubling me, as soon as I understand, as soon as I become aware of that thing and I acknowledge it, it suddenly lets itself go in a way, because now that it's understood, you really don't have to do any kind of strenuous work about that. It just shifts itself. The energy stops pressuring you in that way, and now you have the understanding of what was really happening to help you determine what's going to be your next step in helping yourself ahead. So
yeah, go ahead.
In that case, it has a lot to do with the awareness of this thing, acknowledging it for what it is, understanding how what it has been playing out as in context. And by you, at least for me, usually having that kind of awareness and understanding has released the pressure that was bothering me to now give me the space and the clarity in order to best determine what is going to be the next step.
Yeah, so I like how you mentioned about using that, acknowledging the pressure of what you don't want, and then using it to clarify your next step, because that's kind of what I was more or less thinking of. Because whenever I think of letting something go now, I kind of think of which direction do I want to propel it, because it's not necessarily am I uneasy with the pressure buildup, but it's more like I know that it's misplaced and I have the ability to place it where I wish. How is this going to excel me towards what I want? So I think about transmuting that. So I think that when you're saying that by acknowledging it, typically that then it releases itself, I agree with that. But I think also if that kind of leads into the transmutation, where we have the ability to transmute that energy as we release it into something that serves us. And it seems like clarity, in order to gain more clarity, we can use techniques for clarity or for healing. Like those two ways of transmuting something negative into something positive, that kind of seems to be the middle ground of like releasing that.
Mm-hmm. Usually becoming aware of a thing in itself. I mean, I've always for a long time, I've carried this notion that in order to change something, you first have to become aware of it. May not feel well. Actually, the pain or the pressure itself is something that comes by not being fully aware of the thing itself. Or maybe that we're not fully aware of the thing itself. So because we are not aware of the thing itself, we try to compensate by doing all sorts of things externally. It's like being the pressure being at the back at your back, trying to push you in different directions, and you being stressed and suffocated in order to do something. But the thing is that you have to now shift that awareness to that thing, and the moment that you become aware of that thing and you understand that, now you're able to do something in order to help yourself further. You stop the problem itself when you become aware of it and now have the clarity in order to make the next step work in your favor.
You have the clarity to make your next step your best step.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's easier said than done sometimes, especially when it's something that has a very emotional impact on us. Because what I found in my recent up and down is that the next step is usually the most difficult. And that's what I found for myself, is that in going through this process of picking myself back up from being down, I knew what I had to do next. I knew what the next step was. But what did I do instead? Everything else. If I knew that I had to take action, then I would stay in brainstorm mode. Like, if I knew that I have to actually do this next, what I would do instead was some part of myself would search for a distraction that felt like work, right? So maybe I need to read some more. Maybe if I just sketch down some more plans and take some notes. Maybe if I just watch another video. Maybe if I just do something else instead of that next thing that we're supposed to do, we'll be fine. The thing about the mind is that we know what change is. Like, the subconscious mind is so powerful. You know what change is, and you know that when you make change, things will be different. The thing about the subconscious is that it takes everything into account, right? And I've been getting a lot better with remembering my dreams and becoming lucid in my dreams. And what I find is that the subconscious mind really does survey the whole scene. And I'm starting to get enough experience with my dreams where I'm able to tell that it's not really just you're lucid or you're not lucid. I don't think that's the case. I think that it's more of a gray area. And what I'm saying is that during the dream, the subconscious mind is taking into account all of the symbols that you're presenting yourself. And at least from my study so far, what I'm finding is that the more of the details that you're able to become aware of subconsciously, it's almost as if that collection of data is building lucidity. You get what I'm saying? It's like, say if there was a formula that means for every 50 points of data, you get one piece of lucidity. So it's like, if you're able to train your subconscious mind, or train yourself to allow your subconscious mind to do its thing without blocking it and getting in its way. Let's say, like, for every 50 pieces of data, you get one piece of lucidity. So if you're constantly working with your subconscious mind on a daily basis, if you're training your subconscious mind, a result will be, even as you dream, you start to become more aware of things and you start to become more lucid. And it's now that more of my regular dreams, there's an ounce of lucidity there, versus before there was hardly any lucidity. And when I say lucidity, I mean being active in the dream and also being able to recall what happened and bring that out. Just last night, I had a dream where I was in some type of healing, right? And the healer, I forgot who it was, somebody that I know from here. But the instruction was to gather up all the negativity in my body and, like, hack it up like a loogie and spit it out. But to spit it out in the real world. So as I'm asleep, I'm like gathering this spit, and then I'm slowly starting to become awake, and I don't swallow it. As soon as I wake up, I go and I spit it into the trash. And conscious mind knew, okay, this is silly, it was just a dream. But some subconscious knew that dream was attempting to symbolically help me do something. And my confirmation that we're on the same page was me to finish that ritual in the waking life. Yeah, so the subconscious mind being a powerful thing, taking into consideration everything around it. Hold on. There we go. So whenever anyone of you or me is starting to have like a negative feeling, or something's off, or something's not right, or I'm not liking this, understand that the subconscious mind has already figured it out, right? If you step into a room with like 100 people, right, the subconscious mind is going to analyze every single thing you see, right? And it's going to take notice of this person way across the room. It's going to take notice of that person. And if you get this feeling, this uneasy feeling, it's because the subconscious picked up something. That's why they say trust your instinct. The conscious mind is going to block it and ignore it. So it's like you have to learn how to listen. You got to learn how to listen. And the more that you play with the subconscious, the more you're able to take that into the dream.
I'm glad you brought that up, because I think as well the dreaming can be a really awesome place for pattern recognition if you're unable to do it in consciousness. Like, one thing that I've been really exploring, granted, Akate and I have been doing dream work for a long time. I think there's a couple of us who've been doing dream work. So, but I reached a point where it's like I'm starting to see that there are general themes that my dreams go down in order to express something to me, because there are certain patterns that I'm automatically going to recognize as like a message, as like the message that's trying to be communicated to me, or that information that's trying to be shown to me. There are going to be certain symbols that show up that I'll be like, oh, okay, this means that. And they'll repeat. So it's a good way for you to also see generally what kind of, out of all the information that your subconscious picks up, what symbols does it actually store? What patterns does it store to show to you so you can get an emotional response? Because I think, although it is very important for us to trust our intuition and become aware of it, I think it's more important to just become aware of it, because we have to really take a look at the map that we've created of the territory and kind of find where our biases are, or what may not have been serving us in such a way. Like, I don't think the subconscious is always correct. I think it just gathers the information to help you see it's correct in the way of gathering information, but like, you're the one that is living from a built perspective, and the subconscious molds to that perspective. So that's one thing that I found in the dreaming is like pattern recognition. Like, okay, if there are certain symbols here that are going to repeat in certain dreams where I'm supposed to get this emotional context here, or whatever, or this kind of message, what in my waking life am I taking in as something that has meaning to me? What is also a repeating pattern that I do to elicit an emotional response from me?
That was something. Living from a perspective made already. I'm going to write that down.
This emotional response, I'd like to add this as well to what was being said earlier about pressure and how everything exerts pressure. Dion Fortune said if she could boil down God to one word, she would say God is pressure. And all the different events, emotions, thoughts, all these different things that happen in our experience exerts pressure upon us. So the examples I gave was the peer pressure of culture, the pressure of the government, the pressure of the police, the pressure of when you listen to a song or your favorite music, pop culture in general. There's all types of pressure, and nobody's exempt. In fact, this is how we move and work. We only do things because we feel the pressure to do it, and we agree with it, we conform to it. And there's other pressures that we reject. It's just how everything works. Now, the land of pressure is what we call the etheric plane. The etheric plane is the culmination, it's the world, it's the reality of all these different types of pressures. Now here's the thing, these pressures are not bound to a specific point in space or time. We could say the pressure to conform to a certain culture's standards, that goes beyond time and space. It doesn't matter what part of the country or the world that you're in, and it doesn't necessarily matter what decade you're in. The pressure of a certain culture exists in a pocket of existence, and it exerts pressure because there's been movements that have come and gone, and you'll find people far into the future that go into the past and they're inspired and they want to represent this force that's been dead and gone, right? I think the easiest way to look at this, because I'm not very political, we could say politics, but next to that would be music. And if you really follow music, I don't mean like the stuff that's out today. I mean the stuff that has come out within the past 30, 40, 50 years. You can see that like there have been movements that have come up, and then there was a pressure behind that movement for artists to start producing music in a certain way. We can say blues and jazz and funk and all this different stuff, and how these different movements created the next movement. It made enough pressure and it expanded, and it gave birth to something new, which expanded and gave birth to something new. And here we are. Like, none of these artists just woke up and started making music like this. Each and every one of them took from the past to create what they have created now. And if they do it right, it creates its own bubble of pressure. But there have been many artists who look back into the 50s and says, you know what, I love blues, so I'm gonna represent that today in 2023, right? So the pressure of this stuff can affect human individuals and environments beyond time and space. The land of pressure is the etheric plane. This is the etheric plane, the land of pressure, right? So even if you're talking about doing a ritual to evoke a spirit in order to do something on your behalf, you're going into the land of pressure, and you're opening up a pressure from the past to affect you in the future. There's only so many different human emotions. I found a picture on my phone from a couple of years ago, and it's this wheel. If I find it again tonight, I'll post it on the YouTube. There's like a wheel, it's a pie chart, and it's showing like all the different emotions that a human can experience. And it's only so many. Like, we don't experience anything outside of that wheel. So it's not that, oh, we are so complex. The human experience has been tracked, broken down, studied. So if we've been here for so long, everything has already been thought. Everything's already been done. So anything that we do today, there's a pattern of it. There's a pattern of it that's already happened. Working with magic that affects the emotions, right? Because we could even say the astral plane is the land of emotion. That's the land of this wheel, where all these different emotions that can be felt and the forces behind those. The pressure that those emotions exert of the astral plane is what affects the etheric plane, the land of pressure. And that affects the material plane, the land of manifestation. Sheesh. That's what it is. That's what it is. It's not as exciting as the media makes it to be, but that's what it is.
on the note of building up that pressure or from the etheric plane, right? Like taking that in and what subtle modalities you can use in order to tap into that. This is where like color comes in, form. Um, this is where you can start. This is where the actual shape and the color of the sigil, to the original statement of building up the pressure in order to place it into a symbol for something, right? This is where all of that, and this is where it becomes a key, because on this etheric plane you have the formulas of color, and color is determined by the quality of the thought and emotion. So whenever we see something like green or red, it's going to register differently to us, to each individual person. But that is a piece of that etheric plane right there that we're tapping into, that astral that we're tapping into. So you can utilize that into the sigil. What color is it? What shape is it? You can do that with form too. Form is determined by the nature of the thought. So this is where we're building up from the plane of what's built up. And I think that's a really cool thing to tap into, to kind of just add into what it is that you're trying to channel.
Imagination. This is your tool. This is your arsenal.
It is often, well, it has been said in certain books that the astral plane is composed of areas of pure color. And it's interesting how colors make us feel, like what you just said. In fact, any vibratory impression upon our five senses, we associate with a type of feeling. The color is vibration on the eyes, sound is vibration on the ears, smell is vibration on the nose. All these things are different vibrations in different channels. And they don't have any inherent meaning. They have meaning that is built up. And again, we could talk about pressure here, because say with Tatwashuti and the Vedic system, there are shapes and colors that are associated with certain concepts. And the only reason that we have that information today is because the pressure of that movement was built up for a very long time, to the point that, well, I'll say this first, to the point that someone who knows nothing about it can tap into that system and experience what was written in those texts. But I think it's more than just repetition of them visualizing a red triangle for fire for thousands of years. I think it's more than that. I think what they actually did was tap into the essence of what you call fire and brought out a symbol from that. So it wasn't like they said, okay, this is a triangle, and this is gonna mean fire. I don't think they operated like that. I think they really did get so high into the spiritual plane that they found that this was the yantra to use that closest connects you with the force that it represents.
Oh yeah, I fully agree with that. Like there was a point in the dreaming where Veronica and I started seeing each other as like bands of moving electrons, like whether it was like horizontal lines or vertical lines, like they were making waves, but we would see like each other in the dream as like vibrating lines like that constantly, like whether it was vertical or horizontal. And then turns out it was an astral book where they talk about when there's a certain point that you're meeting someone in the dream world, you start to see the atoms and the actual lines of particles, and you can kind of tell what state someone is in, whether they're vertical or horizontal. So it's kind of that I agree with you. There's a point that we have to remember that we don't create everything.
Right.
That actually we're the last part of
Right.
manifestation, the last part. So we're gathering info from these higher planes, and there are symbols that are very commonly used because that's directly related to that aspect. So yeah, when we talk about the triangle, when we talk about the square and the circle, right? These are sacred shapes that have thousands and like for thousands of years have been used to channel a specific aspect of an elemental. And and it's been proven in almost every culture that you can combine these symbols to create a certain effect because they are attached to the essence of elementals and of what is beyond too. So we I so yeah, I definitely agree with you that there is some stuff that when it comes to you, it I mean it may actually be something that is the root to that aspect. Like we don't create everything. That's not necessarily our job to create everything. We are what's being created.
Right. Even as you said, we're the last. However you want to slice it, what we are in this moment is the last, right? Time wise. The ancient stuff that we're describing happened thousands of years ago. Here we are today. Everything's been done already. And also from a spiritual perspective, from the causal plane to the mental plane to the astral plane to the etheric plane, and lastly, the manifest dimension. It doesn't start here. In this manifest dimension, and at this point in time, we're the last of the last. So that's really key, that what you just said. If you're receiving something, it's not, I would almost say hardly ever you making it up. What comes to us, especially in those moments that we don't recall putting it in our minds, what comes out is usually the result of some subtle communication. And I'm not talking about aliens and ghosts, I mean with your soul. Some subtle communication. Again, like I said, from the future sometimes echoes into the past. But where's that echo happening at? Where's it coming from? It's not our job to create anything. We assemble, we direct, we transmute. Look at the magician card in the Rider Waite tarot deck. As above, so below. He's standing there on the table, pointing up, pointing down, table full of magical tools. The magician isn't creating anything. The tools are there. It's just his job to assemble or disassemble, to direct the flow here and there. The tree of life has already happened. Kether's already poured into Hakma. Within Bina, we just have all the different possibilities of combination. That's why everything after Bina, that's why that abyss and the rest of the tree, if you had to look at it differently, you can say that Kether is a solid space, and its activity of Bina shoots out, Hakma shoots out, and all the different shooting outs are collected in Bina. After that, you would see an infinite number of the rest of the tree underneath it because of all the different possibilities, all the different dimensions, all the different multiverses. What would happen if I just cut the stream off right now? How would the future be different? All the different multiverses are underneath that abyss. That's why there's an abyss, because all of those universes are not relevant to your particular existence. But the point I'm trying to make is every possibility has been created. It's all been created. So what do we do with what we receive? Well, that depends on what's your ultimate goal? What is useful to that goal? What's appropriate to that goal? And if you don't know what your purpose is, what's the next level before finding your purpose, right? If someone were to find their purpose, what had to have happened just before that moment? What had to have happened just before that? Maybe that can be your goal. Maybe you can work towards that.
Yeah, I think that's where recognizing where you are on a conscious and subconscious level is so important, because that's also a clue as to what kind of information you're receiving, what you filtered yourself to receive. What are you currently focusing on? So I think too, a lot of people can get carried away and they'll be like, "Oh, this is a sign for blah 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 or whatever," and they start making up all this stuff and going in a certain direction that they feel out of control of because they're not aware of where they are and how they're processing the information that they're receiving. So they never actually know where their state of mind is. So everything that they focus on, they think is their fate, instead of realizing that it's just what they've been focusing on for years. These are repeating patterns. And your subconscious mind has trained itself to know that you are going to pick up on this stuff. So it's going to send you info through these events. Remember, we have to remember that the subconscious mind doesn't think about what you like or what you don't like. It just thinks about what symbols you're looking at and that's how it filters its information. So that goes to be said with, if you have a particular goal in mind, it's important to be aware of, like, how do I reach my goals? Do I typically whine and complain the whole time? Does some shit always fucking happen on the way to working on these goals? And how often do I dwell on that stuff? Because that's going to kind of give you a clue for how you're setting up your future to manifest this goal. Like, I know this one woman who was like, "Oh, my husband, we always get exactly what we need whenever it's the last minute or whenever everything is about to fall apart. That's when we get what we need. It's such a weird coincidence." And it's like, no, man, that's just because that is the pattern that you've chosen to rate your fate. So now your subconscious and everything from the astral, it's filtering in this information that you could be using as wisdom and moving forward and creating another pattern. But instead, you're adopting this as your fate, as your destiny, as how things are going to be solved in your world.
I was stuck in that for a long time, and I thought it was a good thing. Yeah, no matter, everything may seem like it's at the very last edge, but I always come through at the end. Yeah, I had to realize that I have a hand in this. I have a hand in that.
Oh yeah, me too. I was always one that was like, man, my life was so hard. Like, I can get through this because life was so hard. Look at all this stuff that comes up and I can handle it. And then I realized that life didn't have to be so hard. I was just making it hard.
Right. So I tell myself, especially when I'm feeling emotionally stressed out and emotionally overwhelmed, I communicate to myself, this is easy. This is good. You're in the right place. Everything's going according to plan. And I know that words aren't enough, but I also know that repetition works. Years ago, I
Yes.
used to complain to myself, "Oh, it's falling apart. I don't know what I'm going to do. How am I going to do this or what?" I don't do that. I've stopped doing that years ago. I never do that. Instead, I replace that small talk. If I feel that overwhelm, if I feel those feelings rise to the surface, I begin to communicate to myself, this is easy. You've done this before. You've gotten through it with flying colors. Everything's in the right place. I can't go back to the negative self-talk. Never will. Been there, done that.
Yeah,
Reap the
same here. I started
rewards.
seeing things as a game. I agree with you. I started seeing things as a game, especially when I have resistance and I see, because that's the other thing that Lasange brought up that I think is really key. It's becoming aware of, like, who you want to become versus, so it's like putting yourself in that state. It's like, for someone who has achieved this goal, am I really going to be acting like this right now? Or like, what is it that I want to act like? And if I can see that in a way, not that discriminates against myself, but instead makes it like a game, I can have a lot more fun with who this future is or how this future is going to play out, or all these struggles all of a sudden become really kind of fun obstacles.
Like any bottle or cup you fill yourself with the same quality substance that you want to experience at the moment. I was going to say it's like the clothes you wear for that moment, but it's more something that you feel like container with, and you can actually have fun with how you feel yourself in. and then go and play with that. Also, even when emotionally stressed, it also depends on the kind of framework that you have in that moment, because the emotion is just going to be raw emotion, and how you view it and the framework that you have for it is what's going to tell you what it means to you to be in that kind of a state. For example, if you go to the gym, or if you decide to get up from bed every single day and do a plank for a certain amount of time, and you feel a certain way about how your muscle contracting and all of that, and that may feel uncomfortable, but if that's going to be, in a sense, also raw emotion. If you can actually reframe the meaning of what it means to you to experience that kind of emotion, then you can harness that kind of emotion in order to be something positive for you. You got yourself right in the moment when you're thinking, when you're placing a framework. I mean, when you're placing a certain kind of context on the meaning of that emotion, and then you shift it onto something that actually helps you. Turn it into empowerment, turn it into something that can actually help you get yourself through the activity.
Turn that into something that you can grasp a hold of, something that you can sigilize.
Mm-hmm.
And be it.
Yes, be it.
It also makes me think of how you can use that sigil for negative patterns as almost like a little treasure chest. Like anytime you feel a stress or something like that, you just channel it into this sigil. You build up that pressure, and then you destroy the sigil and you burn it or something like that. Like you release that pressure, but you can place it into an object so then it no longer is affecting that circumstance.
That's a good idea.
Peace. So while we've got everybody here, a little bit of advertisement. First and foremost, we are continuing the book read Saturday, 8 o'clock Eastern Time. The Magician, His Training and Work by W.E. Butler. This is where we will be going. It is the continuation of the previous book read. If you thought the first one was fire, this next one is Inferno. And essentially, this is a master magician teaching a pupil the fundamentals of magic in such a way that you will waste as little time as possible. There's a lot of junk out there. And like I said at the very beginning of this video, when you've done something for a long time, whether it is cooking or knitting and sewing, whatever you've done for a long time, you're going to notice that there are patterns, reoccurring patterns, right? And someone who's brand new doesn't know about those patterns, so they go through a lot of trial and error. But someone who's experienced over many years knows exactly what pitfalls to step over and to avoid, you know, to do things this way or that way. And you've experienced enough to know that for whatever circumstance that may come up, you're prepared to deal with it. That's what makes books like these so wonderful. At least from my point, I can tell that there are people who write books and you can gauge that they may be, maybe trying to sound more advanced than they are. And then there's books where you can kind of tell right away, okay, this person knows what they're talking about. And it's not so much the use of big words or big concepts. It's usually the masterful art of communicating something complex in a very simple way. And that's exactly what W.E. Butler does. Oldfield does it. Yeah. That, and also, a year ago, I released part 1 of the Spirit Summoning Master System. And this was a class that teaches anybody how to work with any spirit safely and confidently. Because I know there's a lot of fear surrounding working with spirits. You know, I don't want to sell my soul. I don't want to go to hell. I don't want to do the wrong thing. I don't want to summon a counterfeit spirit and be tricked and deceived. I don't want to make a pact. All these things that people are concerned about and are still concerned about when I research. Spirit Summoning Master System, if you took that course, you'll see that we really broke it down in such a way that made it practical. So you don't have to worry about any of that. In fact, none of those things are even an issue, right? So what we're doing this year, as promised, is we're continuing with Spirit Summoning Master System Part 2, and we're going straight to the Goetia. So this takes everything that was taught in the first course, and we're building upon that in a deeper way to where, yes, it is a course about the Goetia. We're going to go through all 72 spirits, again, in a safe way that doesn't require any fear or any doubt or any negativity. But it's more than just working with the Goetia, because what is to be understood is that these goetic spirits all represent aspects of our subconscious mind, and they also represent experiences that we all go through. That's why there's a goetic spirit for every thing that you might want, whether it's love and sex and money and health or expanding your spiritual power. There's a goetic spirit that represents all of these things. So this isn't just about summoning demons. This is about opening up those aspects of the subconscious mind that we talked about. Pressure, we talked about a sigil today, we talked about an anchor that you can use to tap into a force. Well, that's what these spirits represent. As I said, or as Alora said even, none of this stuff is new, nothing is created, and it's not your job to create. It's your job to receive and transmute, to disseminate, to put a force here and to arrange. This is what the magician does. This is what the magus does. Your life is a balance, it's an equation, and it's up to you to adjust the formula as you see fit. Working with the 72 goetic spirits is a system that allows you to do that process. And I'm thankful that that's a system that I really started with, because it showed me what exactly spirits are. So if this is something that you're interested in, we are getting into that in the end of the month. Keep you posted. I'll make a waiting list if you're interested. But stay tuned, because there's going to be information here that is not found in any of these other Goetia books. If you have a book on the Goetia, if you have more than one book on the Goetia, you'll see that a lot of the descriptions are repeated. You'll see that there's pretty much just copy and paste. But what's going to be in this class is not information that you're going to find in any of those books. I guarantee you that. So stay tuned for that.
That's going to be fire.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. I'm going to work with you guys personally to make sure that we got this, right? The Spirit Summoning Master System, I think it was great. And it was mostly recorded videos that you watched at your own pace. And that's cool. This time around, it's going to be more like my first class, where it's going to be live and it's going to be with everybody. So, the concepts will be taught. There will be some recorded videos as well, because the whole thing is, I keep teaching about this structure, this 5-part structure. I'm going to go into detail on that 5-part structure in the class, but there's going to be live sessions back and forth so we can make sure that everybody's on the same page as far as how this works. I don't want to just throw information at you. I want to make sure that you actually get what you came for. So yeah, end of the month, Halloween style.
I'm really wondering about now, well, if we're going to go through the 72 spirits, all of them, there's something I'm going to have to do for that, because the same as President Botius was the very first spirit who made who began my journey into spirituality officially. I also tried to kill him once with another spirit, because he got out of control and doing some strange and inappropriate things. So I'll have to fix something regarding that. And I wonder how that's going to be, because I left all communication with him years ago, but still working with demon magic and telepathic magic. Whenever I have even glanced at the sigil or thought intently about him in some way or something like that, it's like I've gotten into feelings of psychic attack or something of the sort.
Mm-hmm.
So I really wonder what's going to be the next step now with this. The curious thing is that when I actually did send another spirit to kill him so he could leave me alone, I found the other spirit dead, but I never heard anything else about him or that other spirit that I sent after him.
I recall in my early days of working with the Goetia, there was a particular spirit that I was working with, and things got out of control. There were other people being affected in my life in a very serious way. There was even death. It took me a while to really get that spirit under control, because it really felt like I unlocked something that I could not close. But it is definitely possible to get things back in order. It's all about understanding, like I said, the framework, the landscape, the lay of the land, what's actually happening here. It wasn't easy. I think it probably took me about 2 years to fix that. But now I understand what was happening.
Understanding. That's key right there. Even before I came to the critical point where I had to shift directions, I had been working with Lucifer Halo. I had been working with Lucifuge Rovocal, and I was also working with King Asmodai. I made them into a triad so that I could work with them as some sort of patrons. So things got really interesting because, well, I had not done the amount of shadow work that I have done now to be in a more balanced state of mind, but the experiences that I also had during the process, during that final stage, as well as when I actually tried to shift directions, they weren't that nice either. Like, for example, Lucifer Halo fought me in dreams, but that had to do also with some perception of him that I had also carried from my beginnings, and some readings of past lives and whatnot. There was supposed to have been some sort of trouble between us. Lucifuge scared the fuck out of me, but by almost making me feel like he was trying to drown me or to suffocate me with his darkness, like trying to pull me out of my body or trying to get me out of bed, out of the body, in order to drag me through the living room to the door to the last spot where I had done a Kabbalistic and telepathic ritual, because I called on both forces at the time. And King Asmodai tried to possess me in astral form, astral or etheric form. But that was my mistake because of how I had framed the ritual to him. And it was Archangel Michael who took me out of that tight spot that night. But what I'm saying is, I have experience with these things, but I want to know how to best work with things so that those kind of mistakes so they don't happen anymore. I don't have to be dealing with that kind of stuff anymore.
Right. And it's a real threat. a possibility that working with these types of energies where things don't go so well. But as I said, it's all about having a certain level of understanding with what these forces are and how they relate to you. Once there's that understanding, it's just like electricity. You know, if you only know a little bit about electricity, you can do a few things, but there's also a risk. But if you're trained in how to deal with electricity, you're aware of all the risks and you have all the precautions, right? You wear the gloves, you're suited up, you know about how many volts and what not to do. It's possible with these spirits as well. Now that's a good thing, because that shows that there is real power here dealing with these spirits. And an even better thing is understanding that there are real methods to where you can safely utilize this power.
Yeah, I think there's a couple of things that I've learned from, well, yes, there are a couple of things I've learned from working with spirits, especially Goetia and Orishas. I've worked with, like different varieties of spirits, right? And one thing that I've become aware of is that they are beings from other, like we are not the only ones. So when we're accessing these planes, right, and these beings, we need to, there's a type of caution that we need to have towards it, not necessarily out of fear, but more of like an understanding that this is something that I am evoking. This is a aspect that embodies, that has a wider net than me when it comes to this energy or whatever it is that I'm trying to tap into. Like if I'm trying to tap into Archangel Michael, I'm aware that this net, that this energy, that this angel, quote unquote angel, is representing, casts quite a distance. So it's broader in its context, and what information comes through, it's kind of like that state control. It's being aware of what state I'm in order to receive this information. Especially when it comes to interacting with these beings that have a wider net of information that they carry. So like with Goetia, I think on the individual level, there's going to be people that have different relationships with Goetia according to already their associations with them. And then also with doing that kind of work. And that within itself is carrying through on this etheric realm, in the etheric realm, which is affecting the pressure and affecting how you're receiving this information when it's being filtered in. So basically, when we're contacting a spirit, what I've noticed is that we're basically saying, give me more information, a lot more information. In fact, so much so that it's like a guiding light. Tell me what to do in this. Give me all of the info. And so we get these downloads, right? And these circumstances that change in our lives, and this relationship with this energy starts to occur. But if we're not aware of ourselves on the etheric level in relationship to this, how are we going to be able to recognize what's coming through and what's not? Richard, what's up? I lost. I thought he was going to come in with something, but yeah. So it's like, I think that, that's one thing I've taken away with working with spirits is like, you can get different angles of them and determining on your relationship. Maybe there was, it's kind of being aware of how am I coming across in their etheric plane when it comes to interacting with this spirit.
Well, it wasn't that nice, even with bodies, because the way that I came across him is that I had a friend in high school whom, for all intents and purposes, I had known from another lifetime. And she also introduced me into spirituality. And we started with demons because for some reason, that's all I could think about. But I came across him because this friend gave me an assignment to look for someone or something using a pendulum. And when I did that, I called upon something and it came as a mass of something. And when I released it, not everything left. And what remained, that was later identified as bodies, was a viper coiled up in my arm. So I wanted it off, but he didn't want to go away. So I wanted him gone, and I wasn't entirely okay with having a demon coiled in my arm. I even tried to burn him with celestial light once. And he also began to impersonate in my dreams the person that I had a crush on, so that I would see him in a more positive light. And I even in a sort of lucid dream, I also remember running away when he proposed to me, like marriage. He tried to marry me, and I ran away from the what do you call that? The arrangement that weddings go through in order.
Proposal?
Well, he actually proposed. I still said no. But at one time, I found out that I appeared in a space where a wedding was being arranged, and when I realized that, I ran away.
I am reminded of when W.E. Butler spoke about protoplasm in magic, its ritual power and purpose. And when you're dealing with the two different types of magicians, you've got the Hermetic style and you've got the Orphic style. I think what I find is that the Orphic style seems to have more tangible experiences with these types of entities, whereas the Hermetic style deals with them mostly energetically. I think it's the Orphic style who experience bumps in the night, so to speak. Whereas the Hermetic, maybe not so much. But it's important to understand the style of magician that you are, so that you can take the appropriate approach to the type of reactions that you're going to have.
Noted.
It's generally, or I should say usually, the Orphic style magician who has a better chance of physically manifesting these spirits than the Hermetic magician, just by the nature of how the Orphic magician's mind works. Stray Panther says marriage to a foreign aspect of self. Wild Harmony asks, how do I find out the type of magician I am? Well, here's the thing. It depends on your experience, in your style. Think about it. Are you the type of magician who is going to have piles of books and study for hours and then level up that way? or are you the type of magician who goes out in nature and is more trying stuff and getting your hands dirty and just experimenting and not really following rules, just doing it, right? Of course, there has to be an aspect of both, but which one of those styles are you mostly? That's a general way to put it. Orphic magicians are more intuitive. They feel, they are very connected with the environment, and it's the environment that teaches them. It's the spirits that teach them directly. But they have a very hard time when it comes to the analytical part, the study part. They have a very difficult time when it comes to actually reading the book and understanding the book, or following the protocol that may be laid down. And of course, the hermetic magician who analyzes and studies and reads, they might have a more difficult time actually utilizing the imagination. They might have a more difficult time actually feeling the magic. They might have a more difficult time seeing the spirits or hearing the spirits. But they might know everything about it, but they might have a difficult aspect practicing. This is why it's so important to study and practice, because regardless of what type you are, by utilizing both aspects, you'll naturally strengthen both aspects.
Absolutely.
Wise Fool asks, if someone understands Kabbalah logically and has read about Klippoth, is it safe for them to work with it, or do you think they should have a certain extent of Kabbalah work first? If so, which sphere? So like my answer is beginning to change over the years, and honestly, I say go for it. Follow with that intuition. There's a reason why you want to dive in, so find out. If you only understand Kabbalah logically, we'll study the Klippoth logically. And then when you start to get into the Kabbalah experientially, then you'll get to the Klippoth experientially. I say go for it. I say dive in. Yes, it is now 11:11, and I think that I will be ending this live stream soon. Speaking of podcasts, though, book read on Saturday. New book, The Magician, His Training and Work, W.E. Butler. And on Tuesday, the next episode of the podcast comes out. How'd you guys like the first episode? Cool?
It was
Not
awesome.
cool? Cool.
It was excellent. I loved it.
Awesome. Peace, Richard.
Peace.
Hello, Richard.
Peace. Hello. Hi, Lasange.
Hello.
I wanted to just quickly add something to what you said there, Trav, to the person. I just taking a little bit of a walk break from my workout, but when you said dive right in, there was a little bit of my Wi-Fi connection cut in and out a little bit. I missed a bit of it, but sometimes when it comes to this stuff, from my own personal experience, if you just have your idea, or if you just have the feeling that you want to pursue something, and instead of getting stuck in analysis paralysis, you just go and do it, right? Sometimes that's the best teacher in and of itself, because you get immediate feedback a lot of times about how, okay, so I tried this procedure, or I was doing this thing, and then, how did I feel? And then you observe how you feel about it. Or was it like, okay, and you can take that, and then you can document that experience in your journal. And then when you revisit that experience, it's amazing, because if you just take action, not only do you put out that vibration into the universe and you get a response back, right? You're going to create a muscle. Thank you. Yes. And it's just like I always use the example of a muscle with something like persistence. With persistence, it's just like the muscle. The more you do it, the better you get at it, and it becomes routine. And sometimes just taking action when you don't have all the pieces or all the information can be incredibly beneficial, because you can get immediate feedback, which is some of the best teachers there is. Sometimes it depends on the context, right?
Right.
Yeah, But overall, I do agree with you, because it's not enough to just read books all day long. You have to practice, and I get the most fun out of it when I am being experimental, when I am actually using my imagination to put things together and work them out, and then obviously observing and documenting my experiences, because I get to see by experience, observe even the processes inside myself at work. And it doesn't matter what at the end, in that way, it doesn't matter how many books you read at the end of the day, or what someone else's interpretation of a subject is. When you yourself get to experience personally what that thing is, or what you get out of that experience, it really builds on something. Well, it builds authority to go in and have your own experiences, seeing what you get out of those.
Yes. And authority is a big part of my frameworks. It's difficult to have continued success without authority. So everyone, if you join late, catch the replay, because this video was excellent. The sigil that will solve all of your problems. In the first hour of this podcast, excuse me, I keep saying that. I'm used to the podcast thing now. Been recording episodes back to back. But the first hour of this live stream, Magus Academy membership, the first hour we talked about the pressure, right, that builds up to create the negative scenario. Then we talked about how to create a sigil for that, how to create a sigil for the positive scenario you'd like instead. And then we further expanded upon those concepts. So if you missed the first hour or two, if you really want to know what the answer is to the title of this video, go back and check that out. And as I said already, be back here Saturday for the magician, his training and his work. I want to see all of y'all. I see how many people are in the chat. Come back and get this real good knowledge. Then, of course, on Tuesday, next episode of the podcast. And like I said, you can expect by the end of the month, I will be opening the doors for my next offering to you all, which will be the Goetia course, the Spirit Summoning Master System Part 2. All right, I'll be setting up, sign up list if you want to be a part of that. It's more than just summoning the 72 demons. It's understanding how to grasp a hold of the subconscious mind so that you can find solutions to your problems, no matter what they are. So if you're interested in that, let me know, and I will let you know. And I think that we are about to wrap it up. Okay. Well, if there are no last words. Peace, Veronica. You were quiet. She might be driving. Okay. Well, my friends, thank you for being here. Thank you for your input. Thank you for being a part of this. And we will keep it going.
Thank you very much for all that you do. And by the way, that one book recommendation you have about Philip Cooper's Magic, I'm on the second chapter of that book. Oh my God, my mind is blown to that book. Holy.
Man, that was the door opener right there.
Oh yeah.
Yes, sir.
But thanks again, and I look forward to Saturday. I'll see you there.
Awesome, bro. Awesome. Have a good night. All right. Well, good night, Veronica. Good night, Lasange.
Good night, Travis.
Good night, Alora. Peace to you.
Good night, Travis.
There you are.
Yeah, I'm here. See you later, Travis.
All right. I'll have a good night.
You too.
This
honey.
is This is TK Trav, aka Travis Magus, here with LVX777. I love you all. Peace.